Hello everyone, my name is Simone Aonzo and I am an assistant professor at EURECOM in the beautiful south of France. Today I will present a Remind, a first look inside the mind of a reverse engineer, of which I am the second author. And let's start. Okay, so what is software reverse engineering? It is a task in which the human being is involved and he's trying to obtain some details about the design and implementation of a particular software. The point is that it requires a very skilled human being with a deep knowledge about the underlying operating system and the CPU. It has several applications, malware analysis, vulnerability research, cracking, so basically every scenario in which you don't have the source code. It is an interactive process that requires several tools like DBIs, debuggers, decompilers. There will be a nice talk in the same track about the compilers, so check it out. Many more, and finally, disassemblers. And our work is focused on the output of disassemblers. Okay, so computers are very helpful for the human beings in order to automate the reverse engineering task, but in the end, it's about, in the end, you know, the reverse engineering is about code comprehension, and therefore is a matter that human beings are necessary in order to complete this task. Even though there is, you know, there is a nice line of research. For example, they were able to describe in natural language the semantic of some function. It is still in its infancy, and I hope that this work will contribute also to this line of research. And so we asked, how do humans approach the software reverse engineering task? We focused, as I said before, on the output of a disassembly. Therefore, assembly code. We focus on the x86 code because it is the most common architecture that is being taught during malware analysis or reverse engineering courses. And we tried to answer to this question comparing novices and experts, trying to figure out what are the differences or analogies, and trying to figure out if novices can learn something, that if we can teach something to the novices that we learn from the experts. We put a particular effort trying to figure out how do they analyze the different binary entities involved, like basic block, function, instructions, and so on and so forth. Okay, so our participants had to reverse engineering two x86 Linux binaries and such binaries, they contain both useless and useful code. And they were inspired by CTF challenges, but with a particular difference. Those binaries do not contain flag strings. They contain an API call that prints a success string. And in order to provide the solution, they have to describe the solution in natural language. And we did this in order to avoid unintended solutions. So the first binary is just a simple TCP servers that after 3 successful connections, it will send to the client the success string, while the second binary is a simple command line interface for management of lists, and if you insert 5 elements in the right order, in ordered, it will print the success flag. Okay, given that there are many reverse engineering frameworks out there like Hydra, Ghidra, Radari, and so on and so forth, and in order to avoid the hassle of instrument all of them, we decided to develop a web user interface that you can see here on the left of the screen. And it is composed of, on the leftmost side, the list of the functions. And for each function under analysis, the references to and from that function. Then on the right side of the image, the control flow graph view, but with a particularity. So just one basic block at a time is readable, while the other ones are blurred. And in this way, the user has to click on each basic block in order to unblur it and read its content. And in this way, we were able to understand on which basic block the user was focused on. We also implemented the function and variable renaming so that our users can keep track of their findings. And finally, all the results of the user interaction were stored in a database. We ended up with 72 participants that we divided between 33 experts and 39 novices. And we decided the category based on 3 different criteria. Due to a lack of time, I can go into all the details. There is the paper, or even better, the Q&A questions session. Finally, we did the data analysis on more than 300 hours of recorded sessions. And just to give you an idea, the 2 tasks, the 2 binaries combined took on average 92 minutes for the experts and more than 5 hours for the novices. We tested more than 30 statistical hypothesis tests. The vast majority of them failed miserably, but we keep the track all of them in the appendix. Okay, now I will try to give you an idea of how our data look. And I will try to do this trying to show you how a novice tried to solve the first binary. The first binary is composed of several functions, but just 3 of them are useful. The main function that we'll call the bridge function, that in turn is called the target function. The target function is the one that contains the code that will invoke the API flag, the API call in order to print the success string. This is a very complicated graph. Pay attention. So on the x-axis, you can see the time in minutes of the running session, while on the y-axis, you see the offsets of the basic blocks within the binary. We highlighted in red, green, and orange all the basic blocks that belongs to the respective functions. So for example, the red, the main, the orange, the bridge, and so on and so forth. And then the size of each point in the graph is directly proportional to the time that the user spent on such particular basic block. So for example, here, she was quickly skimming through the basic blocks, while there, she spent a lot of time trying to analyze these basic blocks. What can we see here is that this user spent a lot of time trying to analyze useless portion of code. And there is not a clear pattern. She was just looking around the whole binary. We cannot see a pattern there. Let's try with an expert. And here, immediately, what catches our attention is that the expert didn't waste so much time on useless basic blocks. She was more focused on useful function, and if at a closer look, we can see a strategy emerging. She started from the target, then she moved back to the bridge function, and backwards again until reaching the main function. This was just, to give you an idea. We investigated further, and we found 3 different exploration strategies with respect to the visit on the call graph. So the first one that I have explained a little while ago is the backward strategy. That is rare, but is more used by experts, and the novice almost never used it. So as I said before, they start from the portion of code that contains the solution to the puzzle, and then they move backwards. Then the second strategy is the forward. That is the most common among our users. They start from the main, and they follow the call graph. And finally, the sequential strategy that all the users that used it had terrible performances, because this is a very naive strategy. They were just analyzing the function in the same order presented in the function list, and it comes to no surprise that experts never used the sequential strategy. We investigated further, and we also had a look at exploration strategies based on the visits on the interprocedural control flow graph, so that, more precisely, how they were analyzing the order in which they were analyzing the basic blocks. The first one we found was the depth-first strategy. What it means is that the users, when she looks at the code, she immediately follows each call instruction that she finds until she reaches a leaf. Then the breadth first, that is the opposite case, then first she visits the whole function, all the basic blocks within the function, and then she follows each call instruction. And finally, the hybrid, that is the most common, that is, a mix of the both strategies without a clear preference on the strategy. We found no correlation about the speed, the performances, but it is worth noticing that the novices almost never used the depth first. Okay, the last slide, the takeaways. So we identified two orthogonal types of strategies. The first one with respect to the call graph, the sequential, the backward and forward. The second one with respect to the interprocedural control flow graph, depth first, breadth first, and the hybrid. And unfortunately, we found no strategy that outperforms the other. But I mean, this is not so bad. We just have to teach them all to the students. So for example, the depth first, that no students ever used it, so that the students, the user, the human being can use the strategy that best fits his way of thinking. Another thing that I had no time to explain in more details, we also found the experts rename the function and variables with meaningful names according to their findings much more often. And this is another thing that we must push when we teach reverse engineering to students, to keep track, to comment everything. And finally, what makes experts is the fact that they are very, very skilled in quickly identify the useless code. And the reason why, one of the reasons, because they are so fast, is that they basically just reverse less code. So there are many more findings in the paper. I am finished. Thanks for your attention.